Chapter 2. And it was at this point, I well remember, that I reached what was for me the true heart of the adventure, the little fragment of real experience I learned from it and took back with me to my doctor's life in London, and that has remained with me ever since and helped me to a new sympathetic insight into the intricacies of certain curious mental cases I had never before really understood. For it was sufficiently obvious by now that a curious change had been going forward in me for some time, dating so far as I could focus my thoughts sufficiently to analyze, from the moment of my speech with that hurrying man of shadow on the hillside. And the first deliberate manifestation of the change, now that I looked back, was surely the awakening in my prosaic being of the poetic thrill. My sudden, amazing appreciation of the world around me as something alive. From that moment, the change in me had worked ahead subtly, swiftly. Yet so natural had been the beginning of it, that although it was a radically new departure for my temperament, I was hardly aware at first of what had actually come about. And it was only now, after so many encounters, that I was forced at length to acknowledge it. It came the more forcibly, too, because my very commonplace ideas of beauty had hitherto always been associated with sunshine and crude effects. Yet here, this new revelation leaped to me out of wind and mist and desolation on a lonely hillside, out of night, darkness, and discomfort. New values rushed upon me from all sides. Everything had changed, and the very simplicity with which the new values presented themselves proved to me how profound the change, the readjustment, had been. In such trivial things, the evidence had come that I was not aware of it until repetition forced my attention. The vales rising from valley and hill, the mountain tops as personalities that shout or murmur in the darkness, the crying of the seabirds and of the living, purposeful wind. Above all, the feeling that nature about me was instinct with the life differing from my own in degree rather than in kind. Everything from the conspiracy of the gorse bushes to the disappearing hat showed that a fundamental attitude of mind in me had changed, and changed, too, without my knowledge or consent. Moreover, at the same time, the deep sadness of beauty had entered my heart like a stroke. For all this mystery and loveliness, I realized poignantly, was utterly independent and careless of me as me, and that while I must pass, decay, grow old, these manifestations would remain forever young and unalterably potent. And thus, gradually had I become permeated with the recognition of a region hitherto unknown to me, and that I had always depreciated in others, and especially, it now occurred to me, in my friend the old folklorist. Here surely, I thought, was the beginning of conditions which, carried a little further, must become pathogenic. That the change was real and pregnant, I had no doubt whatever. My consciousness was expanding, and I had caught it in the very act. I had, of course, read much concerning the changes of personality, swift, kaleidoscopic, had come across something of it in my practice, and had listened to the folklorist holding forth like a man inspired upon ways and means of reaching concealed regions of the human consciousness, and opening it to the knowledge of things called magical, so that one became free of a larger universe. But it was only now, for the first time, on these bare hills, in touch with the wind and the rain, that I realized in how simple a fashion the frontiers of consciousness could shift this way and that, or with what touch of genuine awe the certainty might come that one stood on the borderland of new, untried, perhaps dangerous, experiences. At any rate, it did now come to me that my consciousness had shifted its frontiers very considerably, and that whatever might happen must seem not abnormal, but quite simple and inevitable, and of course utterly true. This very simplicity, however, doing no violence to my being, brought with it none the less a sense of dread and discomfort. and my dim awareness that unknown possibilities were about me in the night puzzled and distressed me, perhaps more than I cared to admit.